Hello again and welcome back to the channel. I wonder what your training provider or HR director would say if you asked them this. How can I improve my skills in or capacity for patience? Today I'd like to draw to a close our series of reflections on a contemporary application of Ignatius of Loyola's daily examen. We've seen how we can use this well-established approach to explore the world of our thoughts, desires, and those influences that make us more free, that is to say open, relaxed, in the flow and creative, or unfree, compelled, confused, or constrained. I'd like to go back to an idea I hinted at in the first of these reflections. That's the one where the thumbnail is a bird sitting in an open cage. I mentioned there that in a moment of choice we can consider what resources are available to us to make that choice. I gave examples of resources such as the ability to plan and prioritise, to craft and construct answers to questions, or to use skills which allow us to come to a place of objectivity or to an emotionally healthy state, particularly in situations that may be challenging or stressful. Now, these are all resources which we have in our personal storehouse and which we can, in theory at least, access at any time we want to. But what do we do when we seemed forced to conclude that the resources we need aren't available to us, or they're in danger of being overwhelmed by the challenge to which we're being subjected? Ignatius had his own way of thinking about this. As well as thinking about past events in his day, Ignatius would always look forward to situations he was likely to face in the day ahead. He would draw on insights gleaned from looking back and would anticipate what he needed to live in a state of freedom going forwards. To that end, he had a practice of what he called naming the grace. For him, this was about turning his attention to character qualities or virtues he would need to exhibit. So walking into a situation with someone he found irritating, he might ask for patience. In a situation where he might feel threatened, he would ask for courage, and if feeling a little low, going to a party, he might ask for the grace of joy. Given that for Ignatius the examen is a spiritual experience and practice, naming the grace was an act of prayer, asking Christ himself to make good Ignatius's perceived deficiency. Now, there would seem to be a principle here that holds good, whatever your worldview. To live as far as possible in a place of freedom, we need not only skills and techniques, but also character. And, as we all know, character is developed not primarily through a programmed course of study or training, but through our unique and personal responses to the experience of life. So here's today's key idea. The regular practice of the examen helps us to recognise and explore not only what we would like to be able to do in given situations, not just how we can train ourselves to think, or even to learn how to understand ourselves and our motivation. It takes us naturally even further into thinking about the kind of people we've become and the kind of people we aspire to be. To begin exploring this further, I recommend, if you haven't already, that you get yourself a journal and every day for the next 30 days reflect on the day just gone by. Find a salient moment and make a brief note or two in response to these 4 pairs of questions. In that moment, to what extent was I free or unfree? In that moment, what was my strongest thought and what alternative thought would have been more helpful? Again, in that moment, what did I want and what did I really want? And finally, in that moment, what aspect of my character came out most strongly? And in a similar situation in future, what aspect of my character would I aspire to see coming out most strongly? After doing this a few times, you'll probably decide to amend these questions to some that work better for you personally. Feel free. They're just offered as a way to get you started. After your 30 days, review your entries, either alone or with someone you trust. What patterns do you see emerging? Where are you noticing change? Where are you starting to do things differently? How are you finding yourself reacting differently? As part of this review, pay particular attention to your answers to the last question pair on character. What's this telling you about yourself? And before you start to think about how you'd like this to change in future, reflect on how your character has changed to get you to this point. When you were in a similar situation 5 or 10 years ago, how did you respond then? How has your character developed to shape your current responses? Or, if you want to think of it like this, who have I become and who am I becoming? Again, feel free to review the material in these 5 video reflections. You can find them in the video podcast section of my website, c21jeffashton.co.uk, and see how the various ideas we've covered have come together. And if you'd like to explore Ignatius' own approach to the examen with a host of practical and varied exercises, I've recommended an accessible ebook on the closing slide. So I offer these reflections in the hope that we will be able to make the most of, in all its various aspects, a freer 2021.